it's been interesting to gain a little bit more of insight onto their life. And then also make sure that I'm a part of their life and not just the day-to-day clean your room and do the dishes or do your homework or whatever it is. And I want to make sure that I'm not just there for the bad parts, but for all the good parts as well.
So welcome back to the True Man Podcast. You know, it's always a joy to speak with someone who shares a similar passion, and today's no different. Obviously, this podcast is dedicated to helping men be better men, dads, and husbands, but I'm not the only one that's passionate about that in that pursuit, or some would say crazy enough to pursue men. So welcome to the show today, Jason McCleary. He is a father, a husband, and he describes himself as a personal development junkie. So he's a dude right up my alley and host of the Epic Dad podcast. Jason, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's like looking in a mirror, like another dude helping other dudes out. That's pretty cool. So Jason, it is noble work as you're well aware to work with men and help them, what I like to say, be better kings in the kingdom. And so what tell us a little bit about your life journey and how you get to this place that you're at today where you decide to start a podcast and help other dads out.
Yeah. Well, a little background. I'm happily married for just over 16 years now to my wife, Becky, and we have 3 kids together. They're 11, 13, and 15 now. So we're right in the throes of the whole adolescence, middle school, high school kind of thing. But yeah, I worked in corporate for 15 plus years, doing the whole desk jockey thing kind of thing, and I found myself kind of being almost felt like it was in that movie Groundhog's Day, right? Like every day was the same thing. Wake up early, be in traffic for an hour to the office, do some work that I wasn't really passionate about, and then drive another hour back in traffic. And by the time I got home, it was, time to make dinner, get the kids ready for bed, get the kids lunches ready for the next day or whatever it might be. And then, fall asleep and do it all over again the next day. And I found myself really being, feeling lost or trapped or just kind of going with the flow of life. And I couldn't figure out, how to get out of that and what I needed to do. And, during this time, I listened to a ton of podcasts on my commute and those kind of things. And, Tony Robbins and whatever it might be for personal development.
Right.
And I'm just like, well, maybe that's something I need to do is just to talk to a bunch of dads and a bunch of people who, have similar interests to me and learn a ton from them. And so that's where the podcast started. I just wanted to have conversations with people and, learn about parenting, about marriage, about, just being a guy and, throw in maybe some health related stuff in there and mental health stuff. And that was awesome. And I had all these great, conversations and met some great people, made some good friends through, different guests and everything that I had. And still wasn't feeling like I was implementing anything. Like I was having these great conversations.
Kind of like reading a book, right?
Exactly.
Wow, that's a great book. Not taking action on it.
Yeah. I read a book, listen to a podcast, listen to a book on tape, whatever. And oh man, that just said my age. But
you're younger than me, man.
Yeah. But yeah, it just wasn't doing any implementation of that. And it became like, I would guess like right at the beginning of the pandemic is a time where I just kind of slid into this depression of sorts and didn't really know what to do with myself. And, I think we kind of mentioned this before we started recording, but my kids were becoming the age of, they don't need me around anymore as much as they needed to, right? They're independent people. They can go to the bathroom themselves and entertain themselves and do all these things. And they don't need me hanging out all the time. And so I was like, well, I've been dad for, 13, 14 years at this point, whatever it was. And how do I recreate who I want to be and come to think of it, who do I want to be? And so, I really took some time to figure out what I wanted my identity to be as a dad, as a husband, as just a man. And, started implementing all those little habits that I created for myself, starting with my health. I went through a health journey beginning of last year, lost 40 pounds, started identifying myself as a runner, which is something I never thought it would happen, prior to that. And yeah, I just wanted to be able to help dads do that as well. So I started coaching on my own, kind of being the co-pilot, if you will, of whatever their dreams are, and helping them to find a path to create habits, or, whatever that new identity is that they need to be to reach their goals. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So thanks for that. You said something about feeling lost, on your journey, and that can be no easy task to overcome that. And sometimes it starts with really asking deep questions, and sometimes that comes from other people. But was it the podcast that where you identified those questions, or how did you begin to ask those deep questions to get, to uncover some things?
Yeah, I think part of it was the podcast. Part of it is I'm very lucky in that I've married a partner who is very supportive of me and is very open with our communication. So she was very open with, Sundays, you're kind of an ass. So we need to figure this out.
Wow.
And,
yeah.
So we able to sit down together and kind of discover, how I wanted to be seen by her and in my own eyes and by my kids and, the world at large. And a lot of the guests that I had on the podcast were definitely a part of that for sure, because I learned a ton from them. So I wanted to implement some of those strategies or whatever it might be. But yeah, just having the time to actually sit down and think, all right, if I'm looking at my marriage, for instance, what kind of a husband do I want to be? And in order to be that kind of a husband, what are the habits that I need to start putting in place to, show up in that way? So is it, make sure we have date nights that, are non-negotiable, and making sure that, I'm always looking for little ways to surprise and delight, even if it's just something small, like bring coffee when she's, waking up or whatever, just finding those things that become piece of me and that I definitely see as something that's important to me, and, creating those habits and following those habits. Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'm impressed. I am impressed. I mean, you don't find too many guys that start work where the work starts, and you're talking about your wife. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, my marriage is, one of the most important things to me. It is definitely the biggest identity that I have for myself as husband.
Yeah.
Even, slightly above father, because I think for me, if we aren't able to model what a good relationship is, then the parenting kind of falls apart as well. And all that tension that builds into a marriage or whatever starts to trickle down, and then your kids feel that, and then, all hell breaks loose. So I think, having that open communication and those, those habits and those just really hard conversations sometimes.
They are.
Yeah. Like I said, she's always been very open with, I think we need to step back and see why you're being grumpy. I feel your energy going down at this point, or, even on the opposite of that, right? I've noticed that when you do, these things, when you do go for a run and kind of take care of yourself, your energy goes up and you feel, you're more outgoing or more up and more energetic with the kids and friendlier and all these kind of things. So it's nice to be married to someone who will call you out when you're being, on either side of it, really. And also being able to lift you up when they notice that you're, you're doing something well. So.
Well, listen, I agree with you 100%. I think that a strong marriage, the trickle down effect of that is, it's everything.
Yeah.
And so, what is this 10-year thing we got going on? I've been married for 26, so I'm 10 up on you there as well. So, but it's no easy task, especially when you have, toddlers in particular. I think it is a very challenging time for a marriage. And then you kind of get into the teenage years and you go through a bit. I'm slightly on the down. I still don't. I was telling you earlier. They still don't think I know anything, but we're getting dangerously close. We're making some inroads there, and so But I'm also in a different season where, my wife and I now have time together, free time together, and it's almost like we're dating again. You know what I mean? And so, if you're enjoying now, just hold on a few more years.
Yeah, we always joke that we're going to be really young, early, empty nesters, because I think I'll be probably 50 when my oldest leaves for college, or my youngest leaves for college. Sorry. So yeah, we'll be right on the cusp of that, which will be nice, and then we can go travel and do whatever we want to do.
Well, there you go. And listen, I think that this is valuable. Especially when you're working with other men, because not every man is blessed with a great relationship. I mean, let's face it, the divorce rate is 51%. So, I mean, it's almost like you got a 50-50 shot if you're working with somebody. So how do you, when you're working with other guys, how are you able to, I guess, transition that experience that you've been able to have, with your own wife into the coaching? How do you kind of weave that in there with them?
It is a little bit of a mix there, because like you said, it's 50-50 whether they're actually still married or not. And I think for me, it was very much the ability to think that I just need to work on myself. I just I was lucky enough that she was supportive of all that as well. But I think even if she would have had some issues with that, I was to the point where I knew I needed to do something. And, as much as I hate to say it, I would probably have gone down that path, and hopefully she would have followed or, been supportive. Luckily, we didn't have to worry about that because she was. But I do think it's important for guys to have a conversation with, their significant other if there is something that they're trying to improve upon themselves, because the things that we do have some sort of effect on those around us too, right? So,
and a cumulative effect.
yeah. And so for instance, for me, I was that's probably about 60 pounds overweight, after all of our kids were born, and kind of in that deeps of depression, that area. And I would justify not working out by, well, I don't want to wake her up. I don't want to, go out early for a run. And then I have 2 dogs and they're kind of barky when, neighbor dogs are out or something. And so every time I left the house, they would bark at something and wake her up. And so I would justify like, well, I don't want to cause any issues or conflict or anything like that. And so I'll just deal with it. I'll stay fat and I'll, do whatever. And the thing that, the conversation that I finally had with her was, that I need to do this for me. And this is what I think is causing conflict or going to cause conflict. And I think this happens a lot where we build up these stories in our head that we think are going to happen.
For sure.
And I'm like, well, she's going to say, well, I really need my sleep and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, go do it. Do what you need to do and we'll deal with it. And I think that happens a lot. It's happened multiple times in my marriage where I thought things were going to blow up and no, it was fine. we always, just have this idea that things are going to go the worst instead of, trusting in whoever you are with and they, trusting that they have your best interest at heart too. So, and hopefully they do. And if they don't, then, there's conversations to be had there too. But
yeah, you tell that story. Is that kind of the pivot point? You guys have that conversation and it's like, okay, I think we're good here. And you're like, okay, man, no more excuses. I'm hitting the trails.
It was, yeah. It became It was another New Year's Day resolution where for the, I don't know, 10th year in a row, I'm like, I'm going to get healthy this year. And then finally I'm like, I'm tired of making this resolution every year and I need to do something. And that was just a precipice of, other things within my life too. But the health was the first thing that I really tackled because I felt I had the most control of that. Yeah. And I also felt like I get the most buy-in from her with that as well, because, obviously if I'm healthy and around, I'm able to do more with the kids and going to live a long life and, at least as long as I can. And, so that's where I started, and having that conversation with her was a turning point for a lot of things. It was that. And then I also knew going forward that, if we had those hard conversations that we had to have, I could trust her to actually, have that conversation and not necessarily blow up at me. Or if she did, then there were, other conversations we could have. And it was just a nice kind of trail into all the rest of the stuff that I wanted to improve upon. So,
yeah. And so so you've talked a little bit about how that helped with your marriage. Mm-hmm. How did that help you as a father as you make this transition to be a better dad?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on there. I think one, I think your kids often watch you versus what you say. Like they don't care what you say, but they do have an idea of what you do. And are you true to your word? And is there some integrity there? Right. And so they started seeing, not just me talking up that I wanted to do something for, myself and to get healthier and whatever, but they also saw me, modeling that for them so they could take on some of those habits. But not only that, it gave me a lot more energy to, play with the kids and be around. And, having the conversation with my wife also allowed me to decide how I wanted to have conversations with my children too. My oldest is 15. We're 3 years and a half, I guess now, 3 years in the summer until she leaves for college.
Nope.
And
a life changer.
Yeah. And so I started thinking about, what are the values that I want to make sure I impart in her? What are the conversations I want to make sure I have? How do I want to come to her or allow her to come to me if there are any issues and not feel like she's going to be judged or that I'm going to like quickly punish her. I always tell her and the people that I want to be the kind of dad that if she's, at a party and mistakes were made, then she knows she can still call me, and maybe there'll be consequences, but there won't be a blow up. There won't be, I'm still going to love her and going to make sure that she's taken care of and those kind of things. So, just being able to create better conversations with them has been amazing. I'm just now now that things are starting to open back up, do the whole, I don't know if you've seen the book, 18 Summers.
No.
Oh man, author is escaping me right now, but basically the whole premise is, you have 18 summers with your kids, and as business people or whatever, we have quarterly reviews with our business and those kind of things. So why not create quarterly one-on-ones with all your kids? And so I'm going to start incorporating that too. I'm on the early stages of that, so I'll report back on that how that goes later. But it's basically, I spent a lot of time with my kids as a group, and as a family as a group, but I hadn't spent a lot of time one-on-one with each of them.
Yeah.
And since they're all very different people and very different interests and those kind of things, I wanted to, come to them on their level and find what interests them and how we can have those conversations. And so that's something I've started incorporating, meeting one-on-one with them for like a day to do. My oldest, we do rock climbing. My middle kid, we play video games all the time because that's what he's into, and Legos and those kind of things. And my youngest is into like art and those kind of things. So we do some of that. And it's been interesting to gain a little bit more of insight onto their life. And then also make sure that I'm a part of their life and not just the day-to-day clean your room and do the dishes or do your homework or whatever it is. And I want to make sure that I'm not just there for the bad parts, but for all the good parts as well.
This is going to sound kind of funny. It popped into my head because I try to say, I use a planner and a calendar, and I really, really do try. And I encourage everybody to do it. And, my schedule just been so wacko lately, but do you pencil that stuff in? I mean, are you really intentional about making sure that you allocate that time? Because that's what I encourage guys to do.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just get it on your calendar, because I say to my wife all the time, I'm like, if it's not on my calendar, it's not real. It doesn't exist. So it's got to show up on my calendar. And strangely enough, when it does, I make time. So, it's weird. So
Same here. I definitely strive to do better at that. I have been able to block off, generally speaking, have lunch with my wife every day. She runs her own business here at home too. So we're both at home all the time. So it's nice to sit down, one-on-one with her and do that. And then, some of the the time with the kids is a little bit different because their schedules are so different. But that's something I would love to do better. Same as you, because I think the same. If it's on the schedule, it's done. It's going to happen. But if it's not, it sometimes gets pushed aside to, something that's going on at work, or some other family thing comes up, or school function or something like that. And you just have to, kind of go with the flow there. But
yeah, totally. Now, I do want to circle back to this too, because I find the topic of identity fascinating. It's something I find myself talking about more and more.
Yeah.
Primarily because, and the way I kind of came across it initially was, as guys, when you meet somebody new, you usually have a couple of questions for them. One, what's your name, of course, and then what do you do?
Yeah.
And I was talking about this earlier today with somebody, which I tended to talk about this quite a bit more frequently, because we as men identify each other by what we do, like something, and it could be something as crazy as, well, he's an attorney, he's got a lot of money, he's a doctor, he's got a Porsche, and and he's a garbage man, so he's not important, or whatever something really goofy. We make all these assertions about people based on what they do. And what I've come to better understand in my maturity and wisdom is that doesn't define you, but that's not how it is.
Yeah.
So talk about identity a little bit and how that can really, I don't know how I want to say this, trip a dude up. How about that?
I think the question, what do you do? It's an easier way for us to put them in a box, right? Like, okay, you must be this way. Like you said, and it's gotten so far that I try not to ask that question anymore when I meet new people.
I'm careful about it. Yeah.
I mean, it is something that's like, it's kind of the opener that we all do just because we don't know what else to talk about and those kind of things. But identity is interesting to me too. It's a concept that I started really delving into a couple years ago. And that whole, like I kind of mentioned, you have this identity as dad and husband, and especially as your kids get older and if they're in sports or something like that, you're like, you're Carter's dad, or
right.
Yes, so-and-so's husband. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you do kind of lose what you are inside, even at work, right? You're a VP or whatever you are, and that's kind of where you're at, and you don't have these outside interests or personal interests even. And so that was a big part of what I wanted to create for myself, is to figure out what that identity was outside of work, outside of even parenting a little bit. Like parenting is a big part of my identity, and husband is a big part of my identity, but I didn't want it to be the only thing. So I started thinking about, well, what drives me? What passions do I have? How can I really create something for myself that's outside of the family, outside of husband, outside of father? That's where running came in for me. Actually, it became something that was very, the rest of my family does not do, and had no aspirations of doing a few years ago, but it became something that was me and had a little passion for. I wasn't running 2 years ago. A few months ago, I ran a half marathon. And that was a sense of accomplishment for me. And that pulled into that identity. But even, even as a person or even in your work identity, you kind of put these almost like a mask on, right? You become this person, even to your wife. And I found myself doing this a lot with my wife, is that it wasn't what she saw me as, it's what I thought she saw me as, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I would come across in a certain way, and I couldn't try and change that because, well, she sees me as this kind of not lazy guy, but you know what I mean? He doesn't really do much, but he's a good father and those kind of things. And creating that identity for myself was a little bit scary to put that out and say, well, I'm actually a little bit different than what I think you see me as. And it was a struggle at first, quite honestly. And it's you have these habits based on your old identity or that you've created, and breaking out of those habits is a little bit harder than trying to break into new habits of a new identity. It's been an ongoing process, and I don't think that's something that I'll continue to always evolve and change. And what do I look like, especially as the kids grow older, right? After they leave the house completely, what's that mean for me? Like, all right, now I'm the dad who, like we were talking about earlier, I'm kind of the taxi driver, and I'll take the kids around to whatever their activities are. But, once that's over, what then? So yeah, it's always going to be an evolving process.
How do you see other men struggling with their identity?
I think that's part of it. I think they almost to the societal norms in a way, right? They see themselves as they have to be the protector, they have to be the provider. And those labels sometimes come as just financial, like I'm a provider, but it's only financial that I think about it in this way. So because of that, because I'm the provider, I have to work 10 to 12 hours, and, I'm not home very often, but that's okay because they get fed, and, we go to Disney every once in a while or whatever. And so that piece of the identity kind of falls into a trap a little bit. And then they're always like, well, I want to spend more time with my kids, but I have to provide. And they don't tend to see that they could do both. They could find an identity and create those habits around that identity that will allow them to be a provider, whether that be financially or, in a nurturing kind of sense, or, of knowledge, right? Of creating those values and passing those values along, and also have a job that, can be fulfilling. So,
how do you help them do that?
For me, it takes a lot of journaling, quite honestly.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. That is really important thing to tell people to do. Yeah. Get it down on paper.
Exactly. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of, all right, if nothing else, if everything that I think of myself is now was not true, or, is just gone, how do I want to create that identity? What are the pieces of my marriage that I want to make sure are in place? What are the pieces of my parenting that I want to make sure are in place, and my career as well? If there's, am I in the career that I am because I want to be in that career, or am I just doing it to, fulfill it, check a box, right?
Yeah.
And, it does take a lot of kind of internal digging and seeing, what lights you up. And if I'm writing this down, is that something that's firing me up and make me want to actually do those habits that are, that I'm finding to do? Or is it just like, it's not really for me? Because there are certainly things that, like, I see guys driving around and Mercedes and, Ferraris or whatever. And that's not me. I don't need a fancy car, right? I have a minivan right now. I'm perfectly happy with the minivan. So
been there. Yeah.
So there's things that, that light some guys up that don't light other guys up. And then, you got to figure out, okay, now within the constraints that I have now, I'm married. I want to be married. I love my wife. How do we work together to reach these other goals that I have for myself?
how do you feel like that's so funny? You talk about the swagger wagon, the van. We had a couple of those. Yeah. But as they get older, you kind of transition away. But they're so handy, man. They're so handy. How, you talked about kind of pivoting as COVID hit, and this has been just a massive challenge for us all. I mean, I remember was having this conversation with the guy that we started our small group together and co-hosted the podcast for a while. And we were recounting COVID because, like you're saying, in our small group, we would talk about not John Eldridge says, posing. He uses the term pose, wearing a mask and being in community. And then like all of a sudden COVID hits and it's like, they're saying wear a mask and be 6 feet apart. And it was very confusing. I mean, here's a group of guys we're supposed to be oriented and we're like scratching our head going, what's going on? And so and then I just look at everything that's happened over the last couple of years. And I look at it like the great resignation that's going on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, people say, well, people are leaving for money. Some of them are, but as when you work with people, I mean, if somebody gives you my wife's in HR, so she just said this, well, somebody got a $50,000 raise. Okay, well, they peeled away. I hope it works out for them. But I think what's going on here is not so much the money as much as people are trying to explore their identity. And sometimes they get it right. And sometimes they don't. And they're going, okay, well, what's best for me? And, my goal as a coach, as I'm sure it is for you, is all these people are making these transitions, and I'm hoping and praying they're doing it and doing their due diligence. I'm not sure everybody is. Now I can't help everybody, but I guess where I'm going, with that, Jason, is, what has the last couple of years taught you? How have you seen men kind of play this out with everything that's going on? It's such a crazy time right now.
Yeah. I think what COVID did was allow people to reinvestigate how they wanted to live their life, right? They saw, especially if, the corporate world who, suddenly started working from home for the first time and whenever, and, they started seeing some freedom and different ways of working and different ways to interact with their life. What I really think happened was life and work integrated.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys have now decided, I like how we can integrate this thing. How do we make it work best for the family and for work? And, still get a financial, compensation for that, but it's not necessarily the money that's the only thing that's important anymore. So, maybe it's more days off, or, we have a lot of companies working, moving towards like a 4-day work week.
Yeah.
And those kind of things. And I think what guys have really decided is that there's other options, and I want to do what's best for me. And if a company can't fulfill what I think is best for me, then I'll find one that can, because there's definitely many options out there. So yeah, I think for me, it was the biggest transition was I saw a different way of working, a different way of interacting with the family, with the kids, being here, being able to have some freedom to, go pick up my kids from school and drop them off and have that flexibility. And the identity in that became a lot bigger too. Because for me, that was like, okay, that's the identity I want as a father, that I can be there, that I can make sure that if a ride is needed, then I can easily jump out there and pick them up or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think identity is a big piece of, that whole transition of work process. So,
well, as we begin to wrap up here today, Jason, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. We talked about a variety of things. Hopefully this has been helpful to dads. Is there a little nugget that maybe we didn't touch on that you would want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece of guys that I work with is, figuring out who you want to be as a man, and like I said, creating those habits to get there. I think the biggest thing that's always been helpful for me was habit creation, learning how to actually create a habit that would stick and not just be not like, easy. Well, I'll eat well for today, and then tomorrow I'll go have some burgers. But I think that, and then having that communication with your significant other, if they're still around, if you're co-parenting, I've never had to go through that, thankfully, but, I would hope that you'd find some way to, create some civil relationship with, as co-parenting, but and then just do what's good for you, but not in a way that makes you seem selfish, right? Like, we need to take care of our health. We need to do these things, mental health, physical health, but we also need to be there as parents and as husbands. So. Solid advice.
How can folks get a hold of you, Jason?
Yeah. So
we'll of course put this in the show notes.
Yeah. But yeah, the podcast is Epic Dad Podcast. Like you mentioned, it's on all the Spotify and Apple and everything. You can also find me I'm on LinkedIn more than anything right now. So just Jason McCleary. And then the website is epicdadcoaching.com. So
there you go. And as I mentioned, we will put that in the show notes. Jason, enjoyed having you on the show today. Yeah, and we're just here, both of us, I think, have the same goal here. Just help dads be the best men they can be. Yeah. I'd love to see a groundswell of that occur in this country, because we need to get back to strong families. And I would encourage you to, contact myself or Jason, and we can help steer you down that road. It is not an easy path, for sure, for some people, and I get that they've gone through stuff in their life. But reach out to Jason, and certainly listen to the Epic Dad podcast. Love that. So thanks for having me on. Glad that you were able to be here on the show with us today, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure being here.
All right, take care.